Welcome! In this lesson, we will cover the events in the Scrum framework according to the Scrum Guide. Scrum Events. Some people call the events ceremonies. This is not the terminology used in the Scrum Guide and is a holdover from extreme programming and other agile approaches. For standard Scrum purposes, we use the term events. There are 5 Scrum events. 1. The sprint. 2. Sprint planning. 3. Daily Scrum. 4. Sprint review. 5. Sprint retrospective. Each Scrum event is meant to reinforce the 3 pillars of Scrum: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. The first event is the sprint, also known as an iteration. The sprint is a consistent and fixed length event of 1 month or less. A new sprint is immediately started upon the closing of the prior sprint. How long a sprint lasts is up to the team and organization, but it should always be the same length of time with a consistent starting and ending date. For example, if you start a 2-week sprint on Monday, the next sprint should start exactly 2 weeks later, on a Monday. This helps ensure not only predictability in a complex situation, but also transparency into the overall process. One benefit of a shorter sprint is that it can reduce risk and increase the speed of the feedback loop. It is often better to learn that you are building the wrong thing sooner rather than later. In general, the sprints need to be long enough for you to create something valuable and potentially releasable, but not so long that you risk spending a lot of time creating the wrong things without appropriate feedback on what you are creating. Nothing occurs in Scrum outside of a sprint. All other Scrum events occur within the sprint, as well as all work needed to complete the sprint goal. All events within the sprint should occur at consistent times. The product backlog may be refined as needed, but the specific sprint backlog should remain as consistent as possible, with no changes made that would endanger the sprint goal. The scope and clarity of the items within the sprint goal may be negotiated and clarified between the developers and the product owner. Sprint planning event. The sprint planning event occurs at the beginning of the sprint event. As inputs to aid in planning, it will take in information gained from the previous sprints. Obviously, the very first sprint planning in the very first sprint will have more limited inputs. The product owner should bring a well-groomed backlog to serve as additional inputs, and ensure that the team discusses the most important product backlog items and their relationship to the overall vision to the product goals. For a 1-month sprint, the sprint planning event is time-boxed to a maximum of 8 hours. It should be shorter for shorter sprints. For example, a 4-hour time box for a 2-week sprint. You do not have to use the entire time if it is not required, but you do have to limit the time spent to the maximum allotted time. During sprint planning, the team discusses what can be done during the sprint and how that work will contribute value and utility towards the overall product vision. The development team, for each selected work item, begins to plan out how to turn it into an increment that meets the definition of done. The output from sprint planning is the sprint goal. The daily Scrum event, sometimes called the daily stand-up. The daily Scrum event should not be considered a detailed status meeting on progress. You do not want long, detailed status reports. It is also not a solutioning meeting where you work out all the issues everyone is facing. Meetings like those should be scheduled separately and only with a specific audience. The daily Scrum is more of an alignment meeting. It is a 15-minute event that should occur at the same time every day and is intended only for the developers. While others may join to watch the meeting, they should not participate. The Scrum Master is not required to lead or direct this meeting, but they should ensure that the meeting occurs. The developers inspect the progress towards the sprint goal and, if needed, adjust the sprint backlog and plan. They discuss any impediments or blockers to the work progress. But any discussions on removing those blockers should be handled outside of this meeting directly with the Scrum Master and possibly the product owner. The developers may find that they need a solutioning meeting as a result of the daily Scrum. This should be scheduled at a later time and should not occupy time within the daily Scrum. While most of this lesson is concerned with strictly Scrum and the Scrum Guide, one solution many Scrum teams have found helpful is the introduction of something often called a parking lot or a 16th-minute meeting extension to the daily Scrum. This is not an official Scrum meeting, but it can help solve some issues the team faces quickly. At the end of the daily Scrum, when the 16th minute of the daily Scrum begins, the team can quickly discuss minor issues or impediments they are facing. Only the people required for the discussion need to remain to go over the issues. In this way, the team can pivot from alignment to solving small issues quickly without holding everyone else up. The Sprint Review event. The Sprint Review is held at the end of the sprint, before the sprint retrospective. The purpose is to inspect the work completed during the sprint and review it with interested stakeholders. Current progress towards the overall product goal is also discussed, and stakeholders may present their suggestions on what to work on next, with the whole group of attendees collaborating on potentially competing priorities. It is meant to be a working session, not just a presentation. While the Scrum team may present their work, the purpose is to elicit feedback based on that work so the team can learn what else is needed and adapt their work accordingly. This event serves as an input to product backlog, refinement, and the next sprint planning event. It is time-boxed to a maximum of 4 hours for a 1-month sprint. A 2-hour time box should be acceptable for a 2-week sprint. Presenting the work reinforces transparency and allows for inspection. Collaborating with stakeholders allows for adaptation. The entire process is meant to serve as the end of a feedback loop to the work performed, thus helping to bring in empiricism to the Scrum framework. The Sprint Retrospective event. This is a continuous improvement event. It is the last event of the sprint. The purpose of the Sprint Retrospective is to gather the Scrum team together and inspect themselves. The team must be open, honest, and transparent, without passing blame or judgment. The Scrum team examines the individuals and interactions that occurred on the team that could have gone better. They also look into their processes, procedures, and tools to ensure everything is functioning as needed. This is a good time to review the definition of done to ensure that it was not only adhered to, but if it still fits their needs. The team collectively decides what should be worked on, and if needed, even uses the outcome of this event in the next sprint planning event, adding items to the sprint backlog to be worked on. The sprint retrospective is time-boxed to a maximum of 3 hours for a 1-month sprint. As with all time-boxed activities, you are not required to use the full time, but you must work to not exceed the allotted time box. We have thrown a lot of words at you that may be new, so let me reiterate a few things. The sprint event contains all other events and all the work. It is the iterative piece of Scrum. The sprint planning event should result in a sprint goal, the overall description of the work to be performed in the sprint event, and that includes the sprint backlog of work items. The sprint goal should result in a potentially shippable increment. The daily Scrum event is a quick daily alignment meeting. It is not a detailed status call or a solutioning call. A 16th minute or parking lot extension to the daily Scrum event, while not officially recognized by the Scrum Guide, can provide value for some teams looking to solve small issues quickly. The sprint review event is where the Scrum team shows off the work they have completed within a sprint to any interested stakeholders. The stakeholders inspect the completed work and hopefully present you with feedback based on that work. The sprint retrospective event is where the team evaluates itself and tries to determine what it could do better. It is meant to be a continuous improvement-related activity. And that sums up this lesson on the Scrum events. I hope that this information will be helpful to you as you continue on your Scrum educational journey. Goodbye.